Dear friends, a warm welcome from the European Movement's offices here in Brussels. We are excited to have you with us for this new edition of European Chats, a vehicle we have put together to invite stakeholders and member organizations from across the European Movement International Network to discuss both the challenges that we're all facing in the context of the pandemic that we're dealing with, but also our aspirations and our hopes for the future. And to do that, we have with us two distinguished members of the European Movement International. We have Veronique Desbrosses, who is the Secretary General of GESAC, the grouping that represents societies of authors. And complementing her is Joseph Elborn, who is the Secretary General of the European Youth Forum, the biggest platform of youth organizations from across Europe. Joe, Veronique, thank you very much for being with us today. It's a real pleasure to have you. To discuss the work we are doing and how we can cooperate to find solutions to our common challenges. And perhaps I can start with you first, Veronique. As you're fully aware, the pandemic has been particularly harsh on creators, on authors, on composers across Europe. Generally, the cultural sector was the first one to take a major hit. So I was wondering, how is GESAC working with your members and your constituency to help them overcome this harsh reality they have been confronted with over the last 12 months?
Thank you very much, Petros. First of all, thank you for your invitation. I'm very, very happy to be there and to be able to share views with you, with European Youth Forum, and also with EMI community. As you mentioned, GESAC groups a number of author societies, actually 32 author societies from across Europe, and as such represent more than 1 million authors, creators from various artistic fields, music, films, visual arts, literature, etc. And it's important to have in mind that authors are the first step, a kind of heart and soul of the individual creative works that build a huge economy, the economy of cultural and creative ecosystem, which includes the entertainment. It's important also to have in mind the fact that our members, the author societies, are a little bit the house of creators. They are funded and run by the creators themselves, and their role is to manage their rights, meaning that they negotiate with and collect royalties from various users of the work, broadcasters, radio, cultural venues, festivals, and then distribute those royalties to the relevant creators according to the usage of the works. So at the end of the day, the sum is making the living of the creator. Now, as you said, the pandemic has totally devastated the sector. The closing of cultural venues for now more than 1 year. Royalties revenues have dropped sharply, more than 30% in 2020, and it is going to last. Forecasts show that it will last in 2021 and above until the total recovery of the sector. So this cultural and creative economy is one of the most severely affected in Europe, more than the air transport industry. The same as the air transport industry, but more than the tourism and the automotive industry, for example. That shows how important it is for the recovery of the whole Europe to have the recovery of this cultural sector. Now we are 1 year after all those cultural projects are on hold, all those venues closed. So the situation is really critical for our members, for the creators. And to add to these economic difficulties, I think it's important to have in mind the mental effect of social isolation and the lack of projects, which is severely affecting creators, but all of us, the public at large. So to sum up on where we are and what we need, I think that what we need is two things. First, a massive public funding to recover, for the sector to recover. And GESAC has been actively asking for culture to be put at the center of the European recovery mechanisms and national recovery plans too. And what we also need is to have more visibility and predictability on the reopening of cultural venues, because today there is a kind of patchwork of situation with different protocols, norms that differ from one country to another and even from one region to another. So we need clarity, we need leadership, and this is what we are asking to the Commission. So to sum up, the situation is very, very difficult for authors. At the level, at national level, our members, the author societies, are putting in place a lot of schemes to help the authors by grants, loans, even hotlines to address the main issues for the most vulnerable creators. They are also putting pressure on the national authorities. And at European level, GESAC is voicing this, alerting the public authorities about the situation and asking for a kind of new deal for European culture.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear, because the cultural sector hasn't just been very much affected, it's also part of the solution to a large extent. But we can come to that afterwards, because I want to bring Joe in as well. Again, similarly to creators, I think young people have been disproportionately affected. Also, both those that are in education and they are able to make the most of that experience, but also those that have been at the start of their career, and after having to deal with the economic and financial crisis of the previous decade, they are now faced with another crisis, even more severe, perhaps. So I wanted to perhaps give you the opportunity, Joe, to give us a bit more details and some figures about how your members are being affected by what has been going on in the last 12 months, and how is the Youth Forum working with them to help them through this?
Yeah, thank you. So I want to sort of begin with a story of Anaïs. Anaïs is a 23-year-old student in Paris, and before the pandemic, she used to work as a part-time waitress in a local bar, which helped pay her bills as she studied. Obviously, the bar has now been shut to comply with increasingly strict lockdown regulations and restrictions. And like many other students, she's then had to search for a new job, a different thing. But just as Veronique was saying, many of those industries, the industries that hire young people, are also closing down. Food, entertainment, retail, they've all been hardest hit by the pandemic. So as a result, Anaïs's money gets tighter and tighter until eventually she has to choose between eating well and paying rent. So she does what every normal person would do. She tries to reach out to the public and French employment services in her area. They tell her, though, that since she's a student, she's not considered unemployed and she's ineligible for unemployment assistance. What's more, in France, she's under 25, so she doesn't qualify for housing benefits either. So that choice between eating or paying rent gets more and more acute. After a series of appointments, she obviously then starts losing hope. She watches as the governments announce these huge recovery schemes of billions and billions that obviously support quite a lot of adult workers and businesses, but feels that young people like her are left out. She starts suffering from anxiety. The financial pressure increases more, but of course she can't afford necessarily to get the therapy or medication that she might need. Eventually, the student union next to her opens a food bank for people struggling. So she's able to join that long queue and get in that queue for 2 meals a day. But obviously, as time goes on, she then starts the student world again, but she doesn't have enough money for internet costs or online classes. So she has another choice: does she drop out and return home? And that's the story which obviously has moved me whenever I got told it, and has moved other people, of the kinds of things that people are feeling, especially as young cohorts. As the Youth Forum, obviously, we're the largest youth network on earth, and speak to and try and speak for the 25% of the young people that make up the European population as much as we can. So we've done some pretty in-depth surveys and research on this. So we got 112 countries covered, with over 12,000 responses from people aged 18 to 34, people like Anaïs, and this is where her story comes from. to really try and understand some of the magnitude of what's going on with young people and the pandemic. I've asked the EMI team to put the full study on the link for this page, but just to pull out some of the key bits of information from that. Whilst Anaïs' story sounds dramatic, it's not an exception. That's a problem. What we're finding is that about 1 in 8 young people don't have any access to the courses, the training, or the teaching that they would be used to. So that's 1 in 8 people who aren't going to get the education this year or last year that they would have expected. Next is then obviously the number of young people who've lost their jobs. So about 1 in 6 young people have lost their jobs during the pandemic, which is again a huge thing. What's difficult is obviously that age range of 18 to 24 is particularly affected because they have to, a bit like Anaïs, they're in that transition. And what is most worrying, at least for me personally, is that then is translated into a mental health crisis. So in our survey of 12,000 people, young people, 50% of them were showing signs of anxiety or depression. And that's really scary stuff. And I think that what I hope we can maybe talk about a little bit is how does that play forward? What effect does that have on the future and how these young people view our institutions, how they view democracy? They've obviously been gutted by the austerity from the economic crisis, and it's clear that young people were devastated by that. We're now in a pandemic, and they're looking at institutions to really lift them up. And even though they were on the front lines, they were the people most at risk. If we look at Anaïs' story, there's a lot of them falling through the gaps. And what does that then mean about how they feel about those institutions, how they feel about democracy? And those things really do keep me up at night. But those are some of the key highlights. And I wanted to share that story of Anaïs, but I'm going to pass back to Petros, and we can maybe talk about the mental well-being further.
I think that's really, really powerful indeed. And we all have come across such examples through our family and social network and elsewhere. But I think it's very important, the work that you're both doing to bring forward the real pain that people are feeling around Europe. And obviously we have seen the EU take unprecedented, perhaps, steps to address the economic and societal effect of the pandemic. Of course, now it's up to the member states to implement those decisions and translate the numbers into real support for young people and for creators. And I think that's where the crucial part is now. Because as I said, I think also young people and creators can be part of the solution of what we are experiencing. And I mentioned that briefly, Veronique, earlier, because I think the cultural sector has a huge role to play in helping us recover from some of the mental and psychological effects of the last 12 months. So I would like to give you the opportunity perhaps to tell us a bit more, how are your members also stepping up and helping society heal?
To come back to Anaïs, is a very good example. She's working in a bar. You have music, there is social interaction, and this is where young people like to be. And the bar is also where when you play music, then there is a kind of chain of value that is going to the creators that then create again, and then it makes our life nice. And this is this chain that is totally cut for 1 year now. Anaïs could have been also a creator behind the scene, working at home for trying to make some music, and her situation would have been also very, very difficult. what I would like to say before going into to answering to your question about what our members are doing to help is to mention the fact that GESAC have commissioned a study to EY consultants that has been made public 2 months ago, and that is very important because it addressed the issue of the weight of cultural and creative industry for the overall European economy. And there is one part that show how important this economy was dynamic, bringing jobs, a real vector for the development of the European economy, with figures like 643 billion as a turnover, which is 4.4% of EU GDP, for instance, employing 7.6 million people, 8 times more than the telecom industry, for example. And this study also shows that the immense and devastating effect of the pandemic on this sector. As I said, one of the most hit sector after the air transport. So there are some figures now, and we are happy because this study is now used as a norm in all European documents, and it is a basis to build a kind of policy at European level for the sector. But to answer to your question, yes, at national level, our members, your societies, from the very beginning, they have put in place a number of schemes to help their members. Money, grants, things like that. You have to have in mind that as a general policy, our members are always developing cultural and social activities for their members, and they devote something like more than 230 million euros each year for this kind of action, for social and cultural action. So they were them who were at the forefront to help the most vulnerable authors, giving loans, grants, financial help, but also helping the authors to produce themselves on the internet in streaming, to help to have live event in streaming, because it was not possible to gather again in physical places. They were also the one at the forefront to launch campaign at national level to make awareness of the national authorities to have some help, because the help that they are providing to their member is of course a kind of first help, but we all need to have a big effort from national authorities to come up to rescue from this pandemic.
Yeah. Joe, perhaps if I may, again, young people have also been on the forefront of addressing the challenges we are facing, not least because often they're frontline workers. They're employed in some of the professions that have been crucial in helping us get through the past few months. Do you think that their role has been recognized adequately, and the measures that the EU is putting in place and the member states, are they targeted enough to support young people, considering how much they were affected, as you so eloquently described earlier?
So that there's obviously a big question mark over that. I think that the upcoming social summit in May is a real opportunity for all the EU member states to realize the potential of the European Pillar of Social Rights to support young people through reinforcement of the Youth Guarantee. And it's an opportunity for them to really put their money where their mouth is, we would say. Everyone's recognized the importance of these workers, and it's clear that these workers, they want to have opportunities, they want to have not unpaid internships, they want to have decent opportunities for their first jobs. They want to have a vibrant and positive civic and social space. And in order to do that, in order to make that happen, there needs to be a huge amount more capacity in that space, but primarily financial. So our call is really, we can't answer that question until we sort of see what they're going to be doing with this huge pot of 680 billion euros. But our calling is really to pledge 8% or more of that to youth poverty and social exclusion as an earmarked or ring-fenced budget, and really drive that money into being a bit of the answer to that question, which is sort of making funds available for those people. And then the other sort of part, I think, is actually just a personal responsibility from all of us, which is the next time you are engaging with someone who's just a shop worker or these kinds of things, don't think like that. These people were actually the people who were the front line, and we need to also reframe how we personally engage with them, because they were heroes, and we can show that by treating them differently and better than I think necessarily we've treated them in the past.
If nothing else, I think the last 12 months have allowed us to reassess a little bit the value of people that we took for granted, both those closer to us, our family, our friends, our co-workers even, that we cannot be with. But like you said, Joe, and like also you said, Veronique, those people that have really stepped up and helped us get through the last 12 months. And clearly, money is important, but I think when it comes to policy making at the European, national, or local level, people should be at the heart of it and identifying the role that our fellow citizens are performing and supporting them in that sense. One thing that has concerned me a little bit, and I know that you both have touched on it, looking at the work you have done, is the effect that the current situation, but also several years of crisis coming up to this, is having on our sense of democracy, on the way that our fellow Europeans engage with the democratic process and the extent to which they still believe in it. Do you think that what's been going on over the past few months, in the past few years, is having a negative effect on our relationship with democracy? Joe, maybe I can start with you and then come to Veronique.
Yeah, sure. This is the thing that keeps me up at night. So I sat down with Commissioner Shinnes a few weeks ago on this topic, and it's a sort of boiling frog problem, you'd call it, right? So if you put a frog in cold water and you slowly turn up the heat, it won't ever jump out, and you can sort of boil it. And it's a similar thing with democracy. It's not that there's just one big impact. So the pandemic was suddenly everything shut down. But with people's belief or attachment to democracy, it sort of slowly gets worse until suddenly it's unsalvageable. I would probably argue that if we look to across the Pacific to America, that might be a lesson we could have learned from them. But my worry is that we've had the economic crisis. The fallout was super hard on youth. We had the pandemic. The fallout is super hard and disproportionate on youth. And then we ask these people to stand up and fight for and believe in and participate in democracy. That becomes a really difficult ask. And it's something which the Youth Forum and myself are thinking about really deeply, is how do we change that? How do we change that picture somehow? And I really don't have all the answers at all. I don't think anyone does. But it's so fundamental to us to keep the hard-fought democratic institutions that we have created. And I think a bit of the solution probably lies in digitization. So we need to make democracy much more accessible to people via digital tools, which is what we're used to using. There's some fantastic and fascinating experiments going on with digital democracy, doing sort of large-scale either collective budget setting or large-scale democratic exercises online. There's some really interesting stuff there. And a part of it is also about bringing a real representation of youth, but not just of youth, but the diversity across Europe to the table of power. Because if you look at the sort of tables of power at the moment, they're sort of very very similar type people. And if minorities, if people of different colored skin, if different genders, if young and old people are not seeing themselves represented at those tables of power, I think we're gonna set ourselves up for disaster. And again, the Youth Forum is standing, really pushing to have much more young representation, much more diverse representation. But even though arguably on gender we're doing slightly better, I think there's so far to go with lots of different other criteria that if we don't sort this out soon, I think people are just going to think that it's all a bit of an elite thing, which is not what we want them to see.
Indeed, there is a feeling that democracy is something that happens to us, not something that happens with us. And we did some research too, not so long ago, and it's clear that a lot of our fellow citizens feel that their voice doesn't matter, that their government doesn't listen to them. And that is a really worrying sense, because it can lead to other things. Veronique, is that something you have picked up also through your members and your constituency?
Sure. I would like to come back to the vulnerability of the author, that is individual, often young people, dependent totally to the success of his work or her work, and very often deprived of any social security or social help from the state. So very, very vulnerable personality and people. But they have a big power, which is a soft power. There are people that can. There are people that are listened to by young people, by the public. There are people that can voice something, voice some ideas, and I think this is where culture and the voice of creators, especially young people, can be very powerful for democracy, because it's a fight against populism, extremisms, and culture is there for that. Culture has a capacity to help people feel all together, to have a sense of unity, to be more resilient to crises. So for me and for our member, we think that through culture, you can bring democracy or sustain democracy. It's absolutely indispensable. And this is why today the situation is critical, because a big economic crisis in Europe may lead to extremisms, populisms, lack of problem of democracy. If you put culture at the very forefront of this recovery plan that we are all asking for, if there is a kind of new deal for culture, as Roosevelt did at the time for America, then there is a chance of not only safeguarding our democracy and our democratic format, but also increasing it. So everything is in my view in the hand of the young people, or we should help them, because they are the future, and culture is the best vehicle to have support in this democracy, which is a very, very very touchy and issue that we need to address at this very moment of such a crisis.
That's a hugely important point, and it echoes to a large extent what Joe was saying, that we need this diversity in our decision making, not least because people relate better with those that look like them and talk like them and behave like them. And the only way to bring our democracy closer to us is to feel that people like us are there making decisions on our behalf. And like you said, literature, music, movies even are such a great way of engaging and helping people become part of the democratic process that we all depend on. Because like you said, we saw what happened 100 years ago in similar circumstances, economic crisis followed by health crisis, followed by, well, we all know the devastation and destruction that came along because of nationalism that emerged from those crises. So we need to learn those lessons and address them.
And I think that on that, there is a good signal given by the president of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, when she talked about this new project of a new Bauhaus, European Bauhaus. Because, of course, if it is not only marketing and superficial tool, but if it is a real movement, this means that she is thinking that the young generation The student for now, they have to work on something that is based on culture, on our heritage, on our on different interdisciplinary projects that will help uniting a little bit the energy of the young people around Europe, around the future of Europe, because we still have to build a new Europe after this crisis. So this is what is at stake, and I think that what is important is that our organization alerts very much and make awareness about the situation, so that the European decision makers understand the importance of culture and of the young generation, not only to rebuild the economy, but to have a project for Europe, which is absolutely indispensable for our democracy.
I can. Funnily enough, I spoke to Ursula's cabinet a few days ago and agreed to sign up to the new European Bauhaus as well. Well, I think it happened yesterday. They announced it, but I didn't see it. But yeah, like it was. It's quite interesting. I think that the instinct behind it is the right one, in the sense that they do see that a lot of what comes out of the Commission it sort of misses huge portions of the population from a communications point of view, and we're going to sort of try and lend our voice to sort of describe as best we can of how we can engage meaningfully with young people, and a lot of what we're sort of saying to them is like, this can't be another kind of Commission exercise where we do consultations and lots of statistics and graphs and fancy things like that. Like that totally misses the point. What we need to do is we need to bring Europe to the young people. And weirdly enough, I was actually talking a lot about festivals, which I guess falls very much into Veronique's sort of space, which I was saying what you need to do is you need to go to festivals. You need to have like a European Bauhaus stand there, which explains something, but is super cool and really fun to do. And that people don't have to like worry too much about heavy questions about the future or climate change or inequality, which are really important. But like you just have to have something cool and engaging to go, oh yeah. Like I remember I was a little bit drunk at that festival and there was like this cool European Bauhaus thing. I can't remember what it was, but I got a free drink. Like it's that simple, and I know I'm like obviously trivializing it a bit, but that's what they need to do. But to see the reaction of the Commission suggesting those kinds of things, it's quite fun. So yeah,
intoxicating European citizens is one way of instilling a European spirit to it. But also, I don't want to trivialize. I think your point is really important because it's also about feeling. You know, you're right. It's not just about big policy ideas that are hugely important to drive forward change, but it's also the feeling that you create. And like both of you, I think we're watching with great interest this new initiative because it seems to be going beyond the usual things. And there is an opportunity there, I think, for all of us. And I'm glad to see that you're both engaging with it because we're interested in this too. But since we're talking about Commission initiatives and same old things, or perhaps new brave worlds, you know, the conference on the future of Europe should be finally kicking off soon. And, you know, the jury is still out on this, not least because we haven't seen it in practice. We've heard a lot about it, but we haven't seen it in practice. But it would be interesting to hear how are you engaging with the conference on the future of Europe? First of all, conceptually, do you think it's something that can deliver? And then practically, what are you planning to do for your respective constituencies? Veronique, if you want to go first.
Yes, with pleasure. But I wanted to elaborate a little bit on the idea to give a positive note about the European decision makers also, because when we presented this EY study on the weight of cultural and creative industry and the effect of the pandemic on this sector to the Commission, we were very surprised by the dedication, interest shown by very high level people. We presented it through to 7 commissioner and vice president of the Commission within individual meetings on the same day. And there is a commitment, because I think that there is an understanding that the cultural and creative sector, and because it is a sector that employs more young people than any other sector, that they have to put it at the center of their policy. And I think that it is also the line of the Parliament, which has been very helpful to try to push forward the idea of having at least 2% of the recovery funds dedicated to culture, and pushing very hard on that, especially with the President of the Parliament and with the Cultural Committee. So we have good signs about that. Now, I think that we have also, and this is our duty, to see how then the money, how this big plan will go until the very end, until the very individuals, it's a very, very big challenge. It's a very big challenge for GESAC at European level to try to find the different schemes, and for our members and for the individuals. So it's a very, very big challenge. So to come back to the idea of the conference on the future of Europe, of course, it's something very, very important. For me, it's still not at the first, my first priority for the time being, because we are more asking now the Commission to make sure that in all national plans that are using European money for the recovery of the economy, to be sure that in those national plans enough attention is put to the cultural sector. It's now that it is done, because the member states have to prepare their plan and to submit their plan until April. So it's really an urgent matter. And also what we are asking is and pushing for a coordination at European level for the reopening of cultural venues. Because as I said today, there is a patchwork of situation, different norms, and nobody knows how to do that, in which norms to apply, which condition to reopen venues. And for the organizer of event like festival, as you mentioned, Joe, it's a nightmare, because if you don't know, and there is a kind of effect, a domino effect. If one festival is not working, then the other would not attract star or very big people to come. So it will have a difficult. It will be a difficult situation for all of them. So we are really pushing and asking now Commissioner Breton and the other to take the lead on that and to find a solution to create this kind of new normality that we need to have after the pandemic, when things will be better. So we have to prepare on that. But to come back again to the conference on the future of Europe, I think that we need to be involved, and we are very happy to see that EMI, European Movement International, have already launched a certain number of initiatives, debate on that. We are very, very happy to contribute, because we think that, again, culture is really part of this future for Europe.
Indeed. Joe, how is the Youth Forum? How are your members engaging with the idea of the conference, and what are your plans exactly for it?
So we're positive about the conference in general. Obviously, we'd like it to be a little bit longer. We'd like the sort of chains of command to be a little bit clearer, in the sense of, I think there's now 12 presidents. But aside from that, obviously it's not surprising, given my comments earlier on the fact that we really need to reimagine and rethink democracy a bit. That the Conference on the Future of Europe is going to be a part of that answer. Now, is it going to produce a massive new treaty? Probably not. But can we do some good things with it? Absolutely, we can. The Youth Forum is unsurprisingly massively involved. We're going to lead the youth input into the Conference on the Future of Europe. We've just hired actually a team to do that, so there's going to be a few people in my office working on that full time for the next 2 years. We're taking the approach of really going and trying to gather the input from marginalized communities. So we're partnering with several of our members. So Rural Youth Europe, for example, is going to try and be that rural input. We've got the European Disability Forum's youth section, who we're going to kind of try and get input from them. We've got the Federation of Muslim to sort of input on the religious side, some of that, and lots of others. And then we're also working at national level as well. So, for example, we're doing an extra effort in Spain, where youth unemployment is by far the highest, and various other countries where we've identified there being problems with youth. So we're really doing a massive project. In terms of what else we're doing, I guess one of the things that we're certainly looking for at the moment, as we're sort of spinning up the project, is other ideas. So certainly, if anyone watching this has an interest to get involved in either the national work that we're doing, so we will be doing stuff in each of the member states. But if they've got ideas on other things that they think we should be doing with youth, and want to get involved, like feel free to contact me, and I can put you in contact with our team. But yeah, it's sort of, again, it's the Conference of the Future of Europe, I guess, is a narrative thing, right? So there's an opportunity to change the narrative on certain elements of the European story, and I think that's the real opportunity. And then one hopes that those narrative changes play forward into elections of various descriptions, and then eventually into the European elections in a few years. So you mean that there's no climate skepticism, there's no vaccine hesitancy, those kinds of things. When I say narrative change, that's what I mean.
Absolutely. Like you said, this is an opportunity that we can all make the most of, and the European movement is always there when debates about the future of Europe are had. We were there at the beginning, 70 odd years ago, and we have consistently tried to edge the project forward. So, but in this particular context, it's not down to a simple individual president or a single constituency. I think it's a great opportunity for all of us to cooperate, to bring through the voices that you both highlighted, those both marginalized voices, but those diverse audiences that don't always engage with the democratic process. And indeed, this is also an opportunity to innovate a little bit. The current crisis makes it harder for people to engage like they used to. So perhaps we can try new forms of engagement for our citizens through messaging and communications, but also digital tools. And who knows, maybe we can learn something about how to do democracy in the digital world. And I guess this is where I want to take the conversation perhaps for a few more minutes while I still have you with us. To what degree do you think that what we have experienced in the last 12 months will change the way that we interact with each other, but also how we engage with policymakers? We talked earlier about the risks for democracy, but are there opportunities here too that we can grasp and make sure that our conversations going forward are better? Veronique.
Yeah, if I can start, I think that's one of the good thing and I get about the situation is that I think, from my perspective, that there is a better connection, understanding of the gravity of the importance of the situation. There is a kind of seriousness when we are talking to people in Brussels who are not anymore taken not very seriously, like, you are the cultural sector, like the fancy guys, etc. No, now there is an understanding that our sector, the cultural sector, is really in great danger, and that it's also a chance for Europe, this sector. So in great danger, you have to recover, you have to do something for them. And it's a chance because it's only with this sector that we can recover at the level of the economy, which is, Europe is first for the economy, but also for a new project for Europe. And when I'm talking about the Bauhaus and all those project, it's about that, because there is an understanding because of this crisis that, I mean, it's a crucial moment. Yes, and I think that there is an understanding that it's a crucial moment, and we have to do the right choice. We have to measure the situation and to take the good policy. And also that the second element is the huge economic, financial project given for the recovery. I mean, it's an historical it's an historical moment. Never in the history after the Second World War, Europe has put together so many financial tools. So there is here a historical opportunity for our economy, for the culture, for instance, to take something and at European level and to really build something new. So for me, this is the two very positive elements, the sense of gravity that people, the decision makers have understood about the situation, about the importance of our sector for the economy and for the rebuilding of Europe, and also this chance with this new recovery budget that is totally an historical leverage to build a new Europe, economic and also a societal project.
Joe, earlier you mentioned that perhaps one solution to the challenges that democracy is facing is indeed innovation in the way we engage with the issues that affect us. And often young people are on the forefront of innovation, not least when it comes to social engagement and social networking. Do you think there are opportunities there that we can take advantage of? I mean, we have seen the proliferation of online discussions, be it meetings or events like this. Can such tools make us better connected and, as a result, better stakeholders of the decisions that affect us?
Yeah, so I guess there's sort of three areas I think that there's reason to hope post-pandemic. Weirdly enough, the first one's actually climate change. So, this is obviously a huge issue, and it's going to require a massive rethink of how we do democracy and capitalism, and that those can be really positive. And the governments have obviously proven in their reaction to the pandemic that they can do big stuff. They can take these major moves. Obviously, it was a pretty negative move to shut down society and make us all stay indoors for a long time. But it could also be another way where one could imagine a massive societal project to really solve climate change. And I think that's one possibility. Number two, my second hope is probably to revive our civic space. So after austerity, that civic space shrunk, and it shrunk so much that it's now so weak it doesn't support a lot of stuff. It doesn't support democracy. It doesn't. I guess lots of people have the feeling of sort of I don't really know my neighbors anymore. That feeling of community, that social civic engagement, then drops massively. And I think that's been. I hope most people have seen that was a big error. That it's not easy to kind of fund the civic space and draw a straight line or sort of a return on investment of a sort of I gave that money and then that impact happened immediately. But if you do fund it properly and into a healthy way, then actually the secondary benefits or the soft benefits are massive. A bit like what Veronique was talking about, musicians bringing people together. And I guess the third hope is a bit, as you said, to recast our democracy mechanisms. So whenever the sort of philosophers of old coupled together our social contract, I don't think John Locke or Thomas Hobbes had much of an idea of the internet. And that's totally, obviously the hundreds of other thinkers between now and getting to sort of the modern form of representative democracy. None of them had any idea of instantaneous global communication. And that fundamentally means we need to rethink a bit our mechanisms on how we do stuff. And this is obviously an opportunity to do that. Obviously, the risk is that we get a worse answer rather than a better answer. But I hope that there's a huge focus from the Commission on that digitization question. Certainly, we're starting as the Youth Forum to receive more questions around digitization and what that means for democracy and how can you do digital democracy and get involved in those kinds of. It often starts with sort of universities trying to do democracy in their campus or something and then scale it up. And those questions I'm starting to see more of, which give me hope that there's going to be some interesting stuff in the future. So I think there is hope at the end of all this.
Perhaps this is also a good way to enter conversation, that sense of hope and aspiration. And I don't know if either of you would like to add anything else, but I do believe that the purpose of these discussions is to exactly strengthen existing networks and develop new ones. And like you both said, by working together, bringing our respective constituencies in the same place, we can eventually achieve a better Europe, a better society for all those that are involved. So I'd like to thank you both for taking the time. This is certainly not the end of our engagement and cooperation. We look forward to working with you in the context of the Bauhaus Initiative, the Conference of the Future of Europe, the recovery plans, but all the other things we are doing, because you're both representing remarkably important communities. So thanks again very much for your time. It was a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Petros. It was a pleasure.
And of course, thank you all for tuning in and following the conversation, your comments and your questions. We look forward to having you again. We're going to have many more events like this. So please stay tuned and talk to you soon. Have a good afternoon.